Hello, today we'll begin developing the RSS Reader application. This will allow us to try out all the things we learned in the previous lessons, as well as see how all the pieces of a whole application come together to create a real working application. So over the next few lessons, we'll focus on how to build an application from start to finish, right from concept to running it on a computer. So in this lesson, we'll discuss the process in which we'll use to develop the application. These days in the market, there are many different formal software development processes that are available, like the Microsoft Solutions Framework. This is one of the popular processes designed for multiple developers working together within a company. So the Microsoft Solutions Framework, or MSF for short, has some basic steps. Firstly, you visualize what you want to build, then plan how to build it, and then use the plan to start developing the application. After going through the development process, we need to start testing and removing any bugs in our application, and then try to run the application. In the MSF, you have to repeat these 5 steps many times for a given software development project. Each time you repeat these series of steps is called an iteration. So we won't be following the MSF steps to the T, we're just doing this mainly for fun to see how they basically work, and not worry about all the structure. What you must note though, is that if you ever do work for a company which uses MSF, normally it takes weeks or months of envisioning and planning before you can write the first line of code. We do need to be a little bit structured in this example so that we have a clear idea of what we're building and how we will carry this out. So to begin with, the visualization. We want to build an RSS reader. The RSS reader stands for Really Simple Syndication. RSS is used to syndicate articles or postings on a website or blog so that client software can determine which news items were recently added to a website. Let's look at the MSN homepage. So msdn.microsoft.com is the homepage for MSDN, the Microsoft Developers Network. In it, there are lots of great articles and resources aimed at developers. So instead of having to remember to visit this website every day, as well as several others, you could just subscribe to this website's RSS feed. So we'll click on the little orange RSS button and see what an RSS feed looks like. Because of the use of cascading style sheet, the RSS feed is nicely formatted. However, when you look more closely behind the scenes, it looks more like an XML. So select View, Source. So this is the XML behind the RSS feed. This XML looks like a series of open tags and closing tags. You have an open channel, the root node, and a closing channel at the bottom. There are a series of items inside the channels. You have the begin item and the end item. There's a title within each item, a begin title and an end title, and the title of the actual article is between the 2 tags. So each combination of an open and closed tag is called an element. An element can contain data or other elements to create something like a parent-child hierarchy. Now we'll look at a different website, and this is the RSS specification. As we look through the specification, we see there are many elements needed within the channel tag. There's a title, a link, and a description that are all needed. After this, there's many optional channel elements too, like language, copyright, managing editor, webmaster, etc., as well as some notes on how RSS should be used within applications which are producing and consuming RSS feeds. Now our application will consume RSS feeds. So we'll just concentrate on the elements which we need, like the title, link, and description. With regards to the MSDN RSS feed, we'll just focus on the title, description, and link for now, and ignore the rest. But it's possible to come back to the applications and search for the elements which aren't needed too. So, we're now envisioning the solution. This just means having a vision. So basically I want to build an application that does X, Y, Z. Right now we're not designing an application, we just have some ideas in our mind about what we would like to see in our application. The vision that I have for this application is to create an RSS reader that allows users to consume and read through the news items which are collected from RSS feeds. We can call RSS feed a channel similar to those on your TV. They are sources for information. So we're going to build a really simple RSS feed and then customize to our preference. What do I want this application to do? I want firstly to allow my user to subscribe to a channel, so to input a URL for our rss.xml file, We then want to allow the user to organize the channels into a folder. So all of our RSS feeds or channels can be organized into separate folders according to their categories. We're organizing these channels because in the end, we could have hundreds of channels. So then with each individual news items that are collected from each channel, I want to let the user view each of them in a web browser and then be able to refresh the channels so I can get all the latest news items. For our first pass, it's probably best to make it a manual process. However, later, we could create this in such a way so that it automatically keeps checking every hour or so to get the latest news. I also want the user to be able to edit and delete channels and folders so they can manage the sources that they want to pull data from. Then in the end, we want to provide feedback, for example, if the application is working or if it's faced any problems. These are some of the design goals and features that I want to implement within this application. So there's a vision of what we want to build. Now we need to focus on some of the specifics for the application. Now we'll be going to the planning phase. Planning means we need to think about our application from lots of different perspectives, and we'll use these to focus on different aspects of the whole solution. Application's logical design lets us think about how the software pieces will all fit together. So ours is a simple basic design. There'll be a single executable application that accesses the internet and then takes the information from the internet and stores it into a SQL Server 2005 Express Edition database. An application's physical design lets us think about where the software will sit. Ours will be a pure client application. However, in larger applications that are built for companies, it'd be better to divide the software application into many parts, each part hosted on a separate computer. This way we can distribute the processing load that each computer is responsible for. This way application will speed up in high load situations, as in the case of websites that have to support hundreds of concurrent users. In that situation, we may have to map what software elements are in which computers. So we also need to think of the user interface. This basically deals with the interaction between humans and the software. It's actually simple, common sense, but about how to make the software more usable. In an ideal situation, the user should be able to sit down and start using the software with very little instruction. When they can't do this, then there are many visual cues which can build into the application to make it more usable. One thing we can do as we go through the design of the user interface is put down our ideas and get feedback on them, and this we do through a low-tech mock-up. So basically on a piece of paper, just draw up some ideas about how our form will be laid and then show them to some friends. Once you get the feedback, use those to tweak and improve your original plan. After this, we need to design the data. So basically make a decision regarding the data element we need to save to the database, what to call them, and what relationship should exist between the data, etc. Now one thing to note is that if you're working in a company, within the planning falls the delegation of tasks and responsibilities to people, and creating a timeline for each task, as well as finding people to work on your project and getting the software and hardware in place, etc. We'll focus on designing the UI and the structure of the database now. These can be done simultaneously. You can down ideas about the UI and the database and think about what bits of information you want to display on the screen, and what are the underlying data structures on the database which need to be created to support the UI. This will be quite simple and basic in the case of RSS Reader Application, as we need to follow a specification. So we want a concept of a folder which will contain channels. So on a piece of paper, I could just write down that I'll have this folder, and the folder will have an ID which would be a primary key, and there would be a folder name. Then I want to create a channel table, and this will have a name which can be called title. There would also be a URL associated with it, which would be the location on the internet where we get the XML feed. It's also an idea to keep track of when it was last updated, and as folders will contain channels, there needs to be a relationship between a channel and a folder here. We need to know which folder will contain which channel. Each channel will contain a series of items, and we'll call these news items. Each news item will have a title, a short description, and a link associated with it. We'll also want to make a note of which date we got it so that it can also be stored in the database. We also need to create a relationship between the channel and the news item. So we can create a channel ID, call relationship, With regards to the UI, I need to download some existing applications and see the best way to display them on the screen. So usually there's a Windows Explorer type view. The feeds tend to be organised on the left hand side and the preview on the right hand side. We'll use something similar for our application. There's Listbox, which contain all our folders, and if you choose one of the folders, you'll see within it a list of channels. Within one of the channels you will see all the news items that are associated with that particular channel. When you select an individual news item, you'll see all the details, which includes the title, description and link. This will also let our user click and view that link in a web window within the same form. So after this is all done, I could show my design to my software developer friends. I could show my UI to some people who are not software developers, potential users, and get their feedback. They may give feedback which I would find useful for my current iteration, but may be interesting for future versions of my application. So the idea is to keep our application scoped fairly small, so that we complete the project and we don't become susceptible to something known as the scope creep. This is basically when developers have an urge to add in a lot of features in the application, and this in turn makes the application larger and larger and thus take longer for it to finish. The idea here is a quick win before we add in new features. So whilst we keep the scope quite small, we can still keep in mind the user's input and try to refine our design. Once we're happy with the design for our version, we can start the development process. And this we will start in the next lesson. So until then, take care and I'll see you soon.